Hi there, it's Mark, back with another Lightroom tutorial, and today I'm going to show you alternate ways to edit eyes in Lightroom. Now Lightroom's got some fantastic AI masking which will identify the features and mask them for you: lips, eyes, eyebrows, clothing and so on, and they work very well, and by and large you don't really need to tweak the selections. However, if you want a little bit more control, particularly over doing eyes, with how the effects are applied within those masks, you've got to start looking at combining some of the masks, and that's what we're going to do today, looking at eyes. We're going to start off with this picture and use it as a recap for the general masking that there is for features on a person, and we're going to take this orange coloured haired girl into something green, but just really as an example of stepping through the masks. But then focusing on eyes, we're going to look at this picture and do that, and this picture and do that. Hopefully you can see the difference in the eyes there. So stick around and play along. These three pictures are all in a zip file on my website, and the link to that zip file is down below in the doobly-doo. If you want to go and get that, please feel free. If you don't want to get that and you just want to watch this, well, click on that subscribe button and it'll help kill the time while everyone else is downloading the zip file. See you in a few seconds on the other side of the titles. You'll start with this picture just as a recap, a refresher if you like, of what the various masks are that we have for people. So we've not edited this yet. Click on our masks. It sees if there's any people in the picture, and there should be. We click on the person. If there was multiple people, you'd have multiple icons to click on, and I'm going to choose all of these as individual masks just because this is a little refresher. And sure, we've got separate masks button checked, and create mask. I'll just zoom in a little bit. So we've got our facial skin. Now this is where I would initially look to get the luminosity to balance with other elements of the picture, and here I think it does need to come up a little bit, so a little bit exposure, possibly a little bit in the whites. Non-facial skin or body, you can see it's masked. I don't think it actually needs anything doing, but I will just wobble the slider anyway just so you can see it take effect. Then we move on to eyebrows. Now with eyebrows, I tend to think of this as fullness, so by raising the exposure slightly, you're not doing a lot to them other than making them look thinner. And by bringing the exposure down a little bit, again, you're not doing a lot to them other than make them look more full. That's how I tend to use exposure when I'm altering eyebrows. Next up, we have the sclera, which is the whites of the eyes, which we're going to be coming back to. But for now, I'm just going to raise some shadows in there, just to slightly bring them up. Then complement that with a little bit on the white. It's a bit more subtle and more control than had we just gone for exposure. Then we have the iris and pupil combined, and here we want to put a little bit of a lift in there and a bit of clarity or texture. We'll come back to these in a minute. And then finally, for the face, I believe we've got lips. Again, with lips you can go for saturation and color and such. I tend to just use the exposure a little bit just to make them a little bit brighter or darker, unless we're doing a makeup rework. Then I'm assuming the model's happy with the colors and such, so I'm just making them a little bit more rich by virtue of their exposure. Teeth. Well, I'm going to crack this all the way up just so you can see it shining through, and just to prove that even though there's a tiny little bit of tooth showing there, Adobe was able to find it and mask it. Had there not been any recognizable bit of tooth, then you wouldn't be able to do that. Put that back in the middle because we're not doing anything with it. Then hair. Again, with hair, it's just little touches for me on exposure to bring out a bit of color even there. You can see how it does actually enrich that color a little bit. Or you could start to think about changing the color of the hair. Or let's leave it green, shall we? And finally, we've got the dress. Let's just zoom out And let's see about changing the colour of that dress, shall we? See if we can get a green in there. to kind of go with the hair. That kind of goes with it, but I want to bring the exposure down to try and get a colour match, a better colour match. A bit more contrast in there. There. So that's a recap on what they do. In this episode though, we are going to be focusing on things to do with the eyes, which brings us nicely to next picture. Okay, so I've already done things to this picture, so I'm just going to obliterate them, so we'll see it all get undone. That was the finished article. That's where we started. So we concentrate on the eyes. Let's zoom in and let's use the detection again. Found a person, iris and pupil, sclera, great masks. So we start with the whites of the eyes. Now what I don't always like, it works quite a lot, but what I don't always like is just addressing that as one. So let's say we use exposure, I'd bring this up, and I'm going to do this more than I would to make it more obvious for watching on a compressed video from YouTube. So we bring that up to extreme to show you the problem is how it can be very sharp against the edge and it leaks into other areas, and that doesn't seem natural. Obviously wasn't natural what I did there, but what I prefer to do is graduate that. Now to graduate it, we need to alter the mask by pressing our Option key on a Mac or Alt key on a PC to get intersect, and intersect it with a radial gradient. And here I'm going to draw a radial gradient and put it there. And now if we do that, you can see how it's not so much in the corner of our eye, even when I go at the extreme. It's not so much in the corner of our eye, it's actually radiating out from the center of where our radial gradient is. Okay, now watch what happens when I switch this off. Pay attention to the left eye. When I switch the radial gradient off, that was our intersect. You can see the effect is on both eyes, but because I've added that radial gradient and it's an intersect, it is now just on the one eye. So if we want to do it for the second eye, you can simply take a copy of this, duplicate the mask, and on the second mask, which also has the radial gradient intersect, click on it, drag it over, put it in place. I'm watching to the left of the iris to see how much the white is actually creeping over. There. Before and after. Let's move on to our iris and pupil, and let's just bring the exposure up just a little bit. And I want to put some texture in here. Now I'm going to go extreme between texture and clarity. If I bring the texture up, you can see how you get far more sharper defined pieces of the iris, all the blades for want of a better description. But if I do the same clarity, it's less real. It certainly looks artificial, and yes, I've gone to 100, but by and large texture is more gentle. Technically, clarity looks for edges and makes the contrast more strong. Highlights themselves and shadows have little change, but it makes darks darker and mid to light range tones more rich, whereas texture is specifically for the likes of skin tones. I know this isn't skin, but it's more for skin tones and is gentler and doesn't oversaturate too. But it's suck it and see and dilute the taste. So I'll put some texture in there, and let's have a before and after. And if I wanted to lighten the eyes up a little bit more, I would probably bring a brush in. Quite small, with a feather. Bring the feather up a little bit more. And just roll back some of the flow and density, just so it's not 100%. And just brush in semicircles on the side which would catch the light. Notice how I haven't gone round the top, just onto one side, and then very subtly lift the shadows a little bit. So this particular one, before and after, you can see the slight glow coming in. If you want to be more pronounced, just a touch of exposure there. And that's how I go about addressing eyes, where the normal bog standard masks don't work. And not so much don't work, it's the composition of the eye and the rest of the tones, how it all gels together. Sometimes those masks are brilliant, you don't need to refine them at all. Other times where I'm not happy with them and the eyes are prominent in the picture, I do this technique. Let's do it once more so it sinks in. So here we have got reset. Here we've got another picture, 100%. I will just position her in the middle, detecting our person, iris and eyes, and I'm going to do facial skin here as well. Start with that, and I'm just going to brighten it slightly and texture it down just a little bit. And let's jump on to the eyes again. So here, let us try lifting the shadows, white and exposure. Now on this particular case, I think the fall off's in reverse here because the light source is over to the right here. So I'm not necessarily needing the technique here, but I'm going to put it in just to reinforce how we're doing this. So we're on our mask, Option key on a Mac, Alt key on a PC, choose intersect, grab a radial gradient, put that in there. How much you feather and such does make quite a difference on this, so dilute the taste. And now we can probably throw the exposure up a little bit more. And that right eye is looking quite good. If I switch off the radial gradient, you can see how it's across both eyes. Because by doing this subtraction, we've actually confined the effect to just this one eye. So let's just quickly copy this one. There are more than one ways to do this. This is just one way I particularly do. Get my radial gradient and drag it over to the other eye. And put it about there, I think. And go to the iris. Let's get a little bit of exposure in to see what colour those eyes are. Okay, with the exposure up a little bit more than I would, well, a lot more than I would, watch the difference between texture and clarity. So if I go for clarity and I slide it up, it overall darkens here because of the nature of her eye and a very small pupil. The contrasting edges on her iris are actually blending in. If I go for texture, not so much, but it's bringing out the higher tones and making them a little bit more rich. So here, because of the nature of the eye, clarity and texture are working well together, but texture is by far the better tool in this instance. And I think I'll bring the saturation up in her eyes as well a little bit. And that's it. So we've seen the normal way of masking a person's face and all the various parts of the face done automatically. Often it works well, but sometimes if you want to go in and alter it for eyes, this is how I do that, using the good old intersect, one of the many techniques I show on masking, of which there are a few other videos. I'll link to one of them above now. And with that, I'm going to have, what time is it? Yes, it's just gone 1 o'clock on Sunday the 21st. That's in the afternoon. So I think I can go and crack open a beer. And I'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.